Start,
Hello,
Abhishek.
good morning. Hello, morning to all of you. Can you please hear me?
We can hear you. Please go ahead.
So, Dr. C. Shetty, Secretary DRDO and Chairman DRDO. to give his inaugural address, please. Sir, over to you, please.
A very good morning. Principal Secretary to the Government of India, Dr. Vijay Raghavan, Shri S.M. Vaidya, Executive Vice President of Godrej, and all other eminent people who are present as panelists and also participating in this. Very good morning, namaskar to you and welcome to you. As the Honorable Prime Minister said just now, this is more for listening the views from all the people based on the budget announcements and looking for how the 25% of the R&D budget can be utilized in the industry and academia and private industries is the point before us. How we can do that, what the mechanisms, these are the points what we need to discuss. Just before that, for the understanding of the people, so that when you are talking, giving the ideas, you will be knowing what is already there so that you can give the new schemes. I just put in very brief time what is happening with academia, what is happening with industry today. With the academia, right now, there are 10 centers of excellence established at various prominent academic institutes like IITs, IISc and other institutes working in different areas with research scholars, professors and all that. This is one scheme. Then there is extramural research wherein projects are given to various academic institutes is another important mechanism what is there at the headquarters of DRDO. Then there are 4 research boards: life sciences, materials, aeronautics and naval sciences is another 4 boards which actually headed by various eminent personalities in the country and professors who again do a lot of research with various academic institutes through projects and try to get the work done is another mechanism. Then there is the labs locally with various academic institutes, course projects are given, and in a total there are about more than 300 to 400 academic institutes are working on this with right now with the total projects worth the value of about 1200 crores. This is the scheme which are running with the academic institutes right now. Then there is a technology development funding which actually for industry for various development projects, research projects to come out with prototypes. A 10 crore rupees for each industry is given. That is another scheme which is in right now existing. There are more than about 50 industries have already utilized this. This is another scheme which is existing. Then there are 108 items which have been completely said that only industry will be making, and soon another 108 items also will be coming like this, which only industry will be developing and will be funded. For that development is another activity what is there for the industries. Now, the model like DARPA to have a disruptive research, thinking of coming out with a mechanism to promote disruptive research among academia, industries and startup. This is one scheme what is also thought about, which your views on that are requested. Then as announced by in the budget, the SPVs are coming, special purpose vehicles for projects which are very important, which have got a lot of demand within the country, outside, and that is another mechanism. So these are the existing mechanisms which are there, and how do we take it forward? Whatever the announcements what have been made, which the budget will be made available, at least about close to about 1300 crores, which will be made available for the industry, private industry, startups and academic institutes, and these are the ideas which are required. Thank you very much. Looking forward for very pragmatic and practical approach where we can take it forward and quickly come out with the mechanisms. Thank you. Mr. Jain. Abhishek Jain.
Thank you very much, sir, for your talk. Now I request the principal scientific advisor to please give his views on this topic. Sir, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Abhishek Jain, Dr. Satish Reddy. You have very clearly articulated what the current situation is and where we need to go. the sum of about rupees 1,300 crores for the coming financial year is not a small sum. It can have an extraordinary amplifying effect. So the goal must be not only to invest this in partnerships with academia and industry, but invest it in a manner where there's a tenfold feedback and growth of the sector. The question really is, before us as the panelists, is how we can do this. There are very important strengths in our ecosystem which can leverage this process. The DRDO labs are extraordinary, and when they are made available to academia and industry for partnership, it has an amplifying effect. The laboratories of the CSIR also are another area which should be used for these kinds of research, which have dual use value and which can serve society and the economy also. Thirdly, our major research institutions have extraordinary capabilities, and like the CSIR and the DRDO labs, they have both intellectual capital and material capabilities of a kind which are fantastic. All of this allows the mitigation of risk by industry in taking on ambitious projects. Finally, I'd like to say the DARPA model is an excellent one, but the DARPA model was tailored for what the situation is in the US. What kind of a model can we do in today's world in which we have a distributed capability, we have extraordinary daring in our ecosystem, in our universities? What kind of a model should be adapted here for us to do is the question. With that, let us go on to the panel now, and then we will hear all the views of the panelists. Thank you very much, Abhishek.
Thank you very much, sir, for your views. Now I would like to invite Mr. S.M. Vaidya, EVP and Business Head of Godrej and Boyas, to please share his views. And for all the participants, I would request that if you have any suggestions regarding this session or how to utilize this Defence R&D, then please write your suggestions to suggestions.drdo@gov.in. I have also shared the email address in the chat box, so you may please note that. Over to you, Mr. Vaidya.
Thank you, Abhishek, and thank you, Chairman DRDO and Principal Secretary to Scientific Advisor to Prime Minister. And thank you, organizers, for giving me this particular opportunity. I have put my thoughts in a small presentation, and can I have the next slide, please? I think on the 75th anniversary of our independence, we should really look into what is the Prime Minister has set a vision towards us. And it talks very clearly about the Aatmanirbharta. And in my opinion, next slide, please. The Aatmanirbharta is going to be into various sectors of any project or a program. Next slide, please. Can I have the next? Yeah. So it starts right from basic R&D, goes to applied R&D towards realization or design of a product. And then I think what we should really more emphasize and focus is on developing Indian standards and specifications so that we can validate our own designs and we can do the simulations as per our own standards, which are more suited, which are going to be more adequate for what is used in India. When we are going to do an export, we can always augment our standards and specification to suit the requirements of the specific countries. I think next important step, which is going to be for us, is into the documentation, training, and skill development. This industry is still developing, and a lot of efforts are required to complete the documentation the way we see any documentation which comes from abroad. The next important point is into the manufacturing. R&D, various new techniques, technologies which are coming up, innovations which are happening in this. And subsequent to that, I think we must develop the infrastructure. There is a huge debt of requirement for the infrastructure, which is meeting the industry 4.0, or now people have started talking about 5.0 requirements. All these are going to be essential so that we can then create an ecosystem which is going to be very competitive, very aggressive as far as keeping the targets for ourselves, creating test facilities, And as Prime Minister, and which has been visualized in our this budget, is to create a quality system and a certification system which is at par with the international systems and specifications. The next important stage is in the R&D in MRO and the spare management, because only developing a good system is not going to be adequate, but these systems are required to be serviced over the next 15 to 20 years. And the documentation control, which I just spoke about earlier, and the MRO will go hand in hand along with the management of spares. And lastly, I will focus that every developed country has used quite large amount of spin-offs of the efforts taken in space and defense technologies to make good products out of it for consumers. Next slide, please. To do this, I think the takeaway is in development of the skills for the people. That is going to be the prime most importance, and Skill Development Council has already taken sufficient efforts, but I think needs to be further propagated into various zones. Ideas needs to be developed, and to do those ideas to put into the reality, I think the funds are required, which once again has been provided. So the last and important point now is really to develop an Indian culture to make this management of large production. Instead of importing 70%, if the target is to have 70% production within India, I think mindset and the culture towards this is required. A lot of efforts, as we heard from Chairman DRDO about the public-private partnership and academia industry collaboration. I think important point is that the industry clusters or industry consortium is also going to be important. It is not that every industry can do everything. I think 2 or 3 industries coming together, and Godrej is one of the examples, starting with MTAR of Hyderabad-based company, to start a consortium approach and develop systems that much competitive, and the risk management also becomes easy. Now that the startups are being encouraged, I think we must create a good ecosystem and support them well with the combination of a startup and a mature company. And finally, the funds, what just now we heard once again from Chairman DRDO, is the TDF and other funds which are available. I think those are going to be far essential. The other aspects to be made successful is looking for a low-cost finance, commitments from end user, and help in export. I think we must improve and insist on our legal systems, which will be commensurate with our products and our developments, instead of operating with the legal systems abroad, which takes out quite a lot of time. And international recognition of our certification agencies. So all round, if we are able to really put efforts into the R&D, I think we will be surely successful. I'm very, very hopeful. Efforts have been taken by all the private industries, including the Godrej, from which I represent. And I think we'll be able to make the maximum benefit of the opportunity which is given. So thank you, Abhishek. Once again, back to you.
Thank you very much, sir. And I hope everybody has noted down the email address suggestions.drdo@gov.in. Now I request Shri Rakesh Ranjan, Additional Secretary, Department of Higher Education, to please give his address.
Thank you, Mr. Abhishek Jain. Namaskar and very good morning to you all. Distinguished co-chairs, Principal Scientific Advisor to Government of India, and Mr. S.M. Vaidya from Godrej and Vyas, Secretary Defence Research and Development, and Chairman DRDO, Dr. G. Satish Reddy, eminent speakers, ladies and gentlemen. It's really an honor to be a part of this webinar. We have seen that the modern research is largely interdisciplinary, and a recent example of COVID vaccines, both in RNA vaccine as well as Covishield, were actually generated through our research institutions. These were in university medical research centers. So that goes on to show that once you involve the academia, the research is much more multidisciplinary. We have taken a step in this direction. We have written to all the IITs and our institutions to link the research labs with their research projects. In the last meeting of IIT Council held about a year back, IIT Council is the apex body of all the IITs. A decision was taken that IITs should link their research with the research labs of various scientific ministries, DRDO, CSIR labs. These are the prominent ones. As the Secretary Defense Research mentioned at the beginning, there are 10 centers of excellence in the academic institutions, many of which are in IITs, in IISc Bangalore, in central universities, as well as in the state universities. We have seen that through this research, the faculty members and the academic institutions, they also benefit because they get to work on the cutting edge technology problems, and through that they get to publish their work in the journals of very high repute and also generate the IPRs, which benefits the faculty members as well as these academic institutions. Similarly, the national programs like LCA, Arjun, Saras, IGDP, they can also take full advantage of the targeted research ecosystem. And that reminds me, more than 30 years back when I was a student, IIT Kanpur was instrumental in the design of the years of LCA. The Ministry of Education has a program called Imprint, which basically stands for Impacting Research, Innovation and Technology. It is a research scheme where our ministry funds the research proposals. In the first phase of Imprint, DRDO was a partner, and there were 17 proposals for which DRDO funded about 43 crore rupees. So that was a good achievement. Many of these projects are nearing completion now. In the second phase, we were partner only with the science DST, that is Department of Science and Technology, but we are looking forward to being a partner with other scientific ministries also. And there has a discussion, there was a discussion very recently, last Saturday only, and before that also there have been discussions on this, how to partner with the DRDO. We have another scheme called Uchchatar Avishkar Yojana, another research scheme, where the participation by industry has been there, and it has been our experience that it is more beneficial for us in two ways. Number one, the progress and monitoring is much better. Number two, it is these research outputs can be easily commercialized. So we will see that we can have, if we can have Imprint phase 3, and in this we can be a partner with scientific ministries, including DRDO, mainly DRDO, as well as the industries. Ministry of DRDO and Ministry of Education and DRDO, they are actually funding 500 research fellowships, PhD, in the academic institutions, for which there is one guide from the DRDO labs and one guide from one of the academic institutions. They pursue research on a topic pertinent to the DRDO identified projects. We need to see that more and more PhD scholars take up these research proposals as their research topic. AICTE has approved MTech in defense technology in 7 institutions, and about 120-130 students have already enrolled for this. We need to partner with the industries for the enhanced opportunity of these students and for internships in Defense Ministry and inculcating entrepreneurship among these students. These two initiatives, that is sponsoring of PhD fellowships and the MTech programs, they do take care of the requirements of the defense industry for manpower at higher end research levels. We also need to further work on producing skilled manpower at the certificate and diploma levels, that is the shop floor levels. For this, we'll work together and design a program for certificate and diploma. Honorable Prime Minister, during his address, emphasized on the uniqueness of defense research and defense equipments. And here we have a proposal. We have been organizing Smart India hackathons. There have been 4 editions in the past, and the 5th is on the way, and we have received 17 problems from DRDO. Apart from Smart India hackathons, we have also organized Specific hackathons like Hackathon, which was on toys, innovation in toys. We also organized India ASEAN Hackathon, India Singapore Hackathon, and Manthan. It was in partnership exclusively for BP-R&D. Let us have a hackathon for defense research, specific to defense research and the problems related to defense industries. Not only with DRDO, but also in cooperation with the defense industries. We can take problems from DRDO and we can take problems from defense industries. And believe me, our young minds are very creative. Many of these problems that we pose to them, they come out with very good solutions. We need to tie up with the industries so that these problems and these solutions which are identified actually fructify into actual products. I will take you back to the last year's budget announcement for a little while before I close. Last year budget announcement actually announced about the Blue Grant. The idea was that there are so many research labs in different cities. All these research labs should come together. The academia and the research labs should come together under an umbrella structure so that the resources can be shared, more effectively utilized. When I say resources, it basically means both human as well as material resources. So a concept is being worked out. It is under discussion. And the basic idea is that the autonomy of the research labs of the institutions will be maintained, whatever is the current autonomy, and they can work together for research problems. It benefits both the research labs as well as academia. The academic institution gets access to the research labs. Their PhD scholars can work on the topics of those research labs. Secondly, the research labs get young PhD scholars to work on their problems. I must appreciate the initiative of DRDO. There has already been 2 rounds of meeting between Secretary Defense Research and Secretary Higher Education after the presentation of the budget. And we are working together to find out more solutions, to find out how we can involve better, how we can collaborate better. As Honorable Prime Minister said, we are here to listen from the other stakeholders. Any suggestion for partnership between the Ministry of Education and the Department of Defense Research is most welcome. Thank you very much.
Abhishek, I think you need to be mindful of the time. You know, it's supposed to be very interactive. You only have 1 hour, and please focus on the agenda that you have for this session. This is more about industry-led design and development efforts. So, and you will have to restrict time limits because you need to leave at least half an hour for the interactions. So all the interventions have to be very, very brief. You can't have a monologue coming out. Now, please be mindful.
Actually, that is what I was about to say. I request all the people to concentrate only on the suggestions. Don't have to do anything else. That is the most important thing. Straight to the point, as the time is very, very short. It's actually for 6 people, 35 minutes. Each is only 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Next is Mr. Vikash Mishra. Vikas ji, 4 minutes, please.
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me, Abhishek?
Yeah, we can. Go ahead.
Yes,
quickly.
please go ahead. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to participate in Defence R&D budget formulation. So I'll be very to the point and brief. In order to develop a unique products so that we always have an edge towards our product and for our defense forces, we think there are two important aspects. One is definitely everyone knows product development and innovation in that area. And second, very important, is manufacturing process innovation and development. So in order to achieve both the goals so that we have a very unique product, we require a robust ecosystem where we have a easy access to funding, where the application processes are easy and startups can apply. Second, sharing of knowledge like empirical models, like mathematics, like science, and hardcore research, which will require 5 years, 10 years of research by premier labs like DRDO. Then problem statements and sharing of those problem statements in a method so that people can understand what are the problems and we can innovate in those areas. And the methods needs to be increased a little bit. And then skill development and funding in the skill development sector, like high-end technology skill development, not just like IT and all. In terms of like developing how to run a transmission electron microscope, scanning electron microscope, focus and beam.
Last, your time is up. Yeah. I would request all of you. Yeah. Please be very, very brief. Points.
Yes,
Only
sir.
bullet
Yes,
points
sir.
now.
Yes, sir. Now, so increase in TDF, it's really required so that we can do a good research, and the suo motu proposal so that we do not have to, if we come up with an idea, it should be accepted as an idea. So these are my points.
Anything else
Thank you
also,
very
you
much,
please send in
Vikas.
the sections if you are falling short of it. Mr. Vikas, go ahead. Vikas Mishra.
Yes, sir. So I was just saying, sir, that we require to have a increase in the TDF so that we can work in a better way, and the acceptance of suo motu proposal, which is there, but it
So
happens.
you are
That's
saying
the last.
increase the TDF funding, which is not sufficient. Okay, right.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Abhishek.
Thank you very much, Vikas. Now I request Mr. Ashley Ruskin now.
Yeah,
And please,
am I
4 minutes,
audible?
please.
Yeah, good morning. Am I audible?
Yes, you are. Go ahead.
Okay, respected Chairman DRDO, all the esteemed panelists. I'll keep it short and sweet as we have only 5 minutes. As an industry representative, I would like to bring out the basic issues and the points that are required, mainly focusing on Aatmanirbharta. So the very first point I'd like to bring out is that the Indian industry has a lot of capability. And while IDDM has been introduced, I would like to say that there are a lot of existing technologies in our country which are not getting the opportunity to be used in DRDO projects. So in spite of IDDM, we need a very strict policy which tells us that IDDM should be introduced. A quick example is COTS items like controllers, brushless motors, drives. In spite of technology being available in the country, we find that it is being imported. So this is, if we are talking self-reliance, I think this has to be taken very seriously, and Indian companies should be given this opportunity first. And so there is this inertia mainly because of risk averse. People are scared to take a risk with a new company, but self-reliance will not come without risk. So this is the first point I wanted to mention. Second is on the speed of development of projects. We have been involved as a company from small sub-module levels to complete turnkey solutions like launchers, missile launchers. The time scale that it takes to complete these projects is very long. Minimum 3 to 5 years is the gestation period for such projects. And we have to find a way to reduce the testing time. And in that, my suggestion is some of this funding that we are talking about can be used to create more EMC, EMI labs, which takes a very long time. Getting slots is a problem. So reducing the time scale could be a big exercise. Maybe both industry, DRDO have to get together and discuss how we can bring down the development cycle for various projects. And I guess we can do much more then. If I have to just summarize, since I have very little time, one is on the IDTM part. Can we make a clear identity and create a directory of existing technologies in India and companies which can directly contribute? This is something we've been pushing from the industry for a long time, so that the list is clear when tenders are released, that such technologies are available in the country and should be given priority first. Second, from the funding point of view, the biggest fear that the industry has is the defense business is on and off, which means there is no consistency of getting orders. If you have to set up a facility, say for producing large scale motors, drives, which go into almost every project, we need some kind of continuity on this matter. In that case, funding will definitely help to set a facility of this kind. which will reduce the burden on the basically partner. And finally, last point is just on academia and industry. I think academia has a very strong theoretical knowledge. The industry has a very good practical knowledge, and that link between the two is missing. If government can facilitate through some process a link for projects to be done with this combination, that would be a good mix. I think that's my point for this 5 minutes. Thank you for giving the opportunity to us.
I also request all the others to use the chat box, because you may not have time, so keep your suggestions flowing into the chat box. Yeah.
Let us go on now to the remaining two panelists, MK Gupta and Vish Sahasranama. Then we should have some time for discussion.
Am I audible, Abhishek?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, a very good morning to all. I'll be very brief, sir. So while there have been many efforts in indigenizing various defense subsystem platform technologies and components assembly, but then have not been much focus on the indigenization and development of the raw materials for defense application. Just to share with the August forum, we have been successfully manufacturing armor plates for all types of tank. But on the other hand, the testing of the anti-tank ammunition, we have been importing armor steel plate, rolled armor, harmonized armor worth hundreds of crores per annum. Similarly, metallic portion of FS APDS ammunition for Rajam tank we have been importing metallic blanks. So there are many examples of successful development of defense system platform, but there are critical raw materials for which we are still dependent on foreign resources. So a committee, Sir Jaju sir is very well aware, was formed, and we could identify some raw materials worth 15,000 crores. My suggestions now, I will not go much into details. My suggestions are, sir, I would like to summarize on the declaration of positive indigenization of list of alloys, super alloy steels, armor steel, super alloys, titanium alloys to stop imports immediately, since the country has enough capacity and capability to produce these alloys in-house. So, and whenever new contract TOT agreements are done, raw material indigenization should be part and parcel of this agreement, where foreign OEMs should agree to indigenize raw materials, sir, along with the R&D. A review should be made in the Indian defense industry to get a suitable clause included for indigenization, technical know-how, transfer, warranty of critical and strategic raw material in the existing TOT, sir. This may be suitably financed from the indigenous fund. Purchase procedures of all DPSU services should be amended to include that all raw materials used in the manufacturing of defense equipment must be sourced from indigenous manufacturers and not from traders. There's again large volumes of raw material are being sourced from traders who are importing such materials. So all the domestic manufacturers who have developed strategic raw materials should be facilitated for testing and certification by all certification agencies, sir. These certification agencies should create a mechanism for providing financial support to the domestic manufacturer. There are many problems in the certification end. Who will fund the certification? Who will fund the testing cost? There are many issues, sir. In order to ensure that defense materials is sourced through established indigenous sources, it needs to be stipulated in the offset policy that offset credits will be assigned to foreign OEMs only if the defense raw materials are purchased from indigenous defense manufacturers registered with MOD, DRDO, DGQA, DPSU, DPIIT, not from traders. Further, sir, infusion of R&D funds for private sector. We have seen that coming in the budget. We must go in for full implementation. Then we request for the PLI scheme for the military materials for better incentives to be introduced, sir. I hope this platform will provide the appropriate forum to discuss and deliberate the way forward. So thank you very much. Jai Hind. Over to you, Abhishek.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Vish Sahasranama, thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity. Can I have my slide deck, please? So as the slides are coming up, let me get started. So under the broad universe of defense R&D, my focus today is in harnessing startups to accelerate India's attainment of self-reliance and export excellence in defense technologies. Next slide. Over the 40 years, starting from the days of TCS and Infosys to the most recent unicorns, India's tech sector has gained global salience, and significance, and the credit solely goes to the tech entrepreneurs and their startups. Over the past 3 years or so, I've had the privilege to contribute to the establishment and execution of IDEX. And based on the many explorations and initiatives we have implemented, I've come up with a few call to action recommendations that can be taken up for wider implementation within the defense sector. The greatest force of transformation in any sector, commercial or industrial or strategic, man has ever known, comes from the combination of entrepreneurial innovation and venture capital. And startups are the engines of this transformation powered by these forces. Globally, large companies and conglomerates have achieved massive success in their own transformation and growth through partnerships with startups in innovation and in investments. By running structured corporate accelerator or corporate venture capital programs, massive value and economic potential have been unlocked. So it is time we scale these proven models within the DPSUs and leverage a portion of their R&D investments to fund such startup accelerator and corporate venture capital programs and initiatives. Even a 20% allocation will translate into huge business value and ROI potential. The focus of these initiatives should be in domains where there is huge potential to rapidly translate scientific discoveries and technology innovations into military grade products. Next slide. The next slide also. Now, over the past 3 years, IDEX has expanded to cover a wide array of technologically advanced product categories, covering the capability needs of both the tri-services and the DPSUs. With the 6th edition of the Defence India Startup Challenge, the new DPSUs from the corporatization of OFPs and the Central Armed Police Forces under MHA have also come into the IDEX fold. And as you can see, there is a variety of technologies and products which the nodal agencies from the DPSUs and the tri-services are now working with in terms of co-creating these products with the startups in the country. Next slide. 123, an excellent number of IDEX innovators are currently selected and are being nurtured through this program in order to achieve the indigenization of these technologically advanced solutions and capabilities. Next slide. Now, to drive the execution, the role of culture can never be overestimated. And the key aspect there is to move from a culture of commercial procurement to a culture of seeding, nurturing, and scaling India's own world-class defense tech companies. Here again, the mindset of VCs in terms of how they build and scale companies is most critical.
Which last minute, please.
Yeah, I'm done. Next slide. Yeah, I will stop now, but if the opportunity arises during the interactions, I will elaborate on the mindset and persona aspects of military officers, military users, and the DPSU executives in terms of moving from a procurement manager to a product manager mindset and persona. Thank you once again for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mail wish. Send a detailed mail wish.
Yes, sir. I will do, sir. Certainly, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Ready, I will just say one brief point, request Mr. Vaidya to add to that, and then we can have Ranjana and Apara coordinating the interactive session. We have in this part now heard from everyone on what they want done, both from you as well as from the panelists. Can we have at the interactive session a brief discussion on how to do it in the next 3 months, 1 year, how to embark on that direction? So that is my suggestion for the interactive part, and I request Dr. Ranjana and Shri Apparao to coordinate that. But before that, a word from Mr. Vaidya. Any comments on this?
I just want to make one point that the centers of excellence which have been there now between DRDO and academic institutes, and now we are converting it as the centers as DRDO, industry, and academia. This is the synergetic centers, the centers of DRDO, industry, and academia, where in each project, industry is brought in the development research stage itself by the professors and the scientists who are working there. This is one decision we are taking.
Thank you. I have some thoughts on that, but Mr. Vaidya, any comments before we start the interaction?
I think we can go ahead with the interaction. I don't want to take away time from our participants who are very eager to share. Then we can then come back on it. I think that will be more appropriate. I already spoken something, others have not been able to get time to do that.
Thank you. Ranjana, Apparao, can you please start the interactive part?
Thank you. I think I have the easiest job today. I just have to ask the questions others have asked. And so, again, thank you. And I have many interesting and thoughtful questions that people have put on the chat. And there are very many of them. And we'll try and see what we can do in the next few minutes. But the questions that we are not able to answer, the folks from DRDO will come back to the people who ask this. The first question is to utilize the budget earmarked for private players. This is from Arun, all the panelists. Information capacity is the biggest concern. I'm sorry, information opacity is the biggest concern. Please create channels where private players and academics can reach out, understand requirements, and more importantly, considering possible use of work they are already doing. That was, I think it's more a suggestion than a question. And the second question is, last 2 years, progress in reinforcement learning has made it possible to make better aircraft. Who does one reach out to collaborate and consider possible? I don't know who can answer that question, but the rest.
Chairman can assign this question to any of the panelists.
Yes. So, but you were breaking up. What is the question again? Could you repeat the last part? Last sentence I missed.
Yeah, I'll read it again. It's a short question. Who does one reach out to collaborate and consider possible? This is for anti-aircraft artillery.
Yeah, I would suggest that this question be addressed by the Chairman DRDO. Satish?
The next question, while
Satish, the question was
anti-aircraft artillery can be by ARDE Pune. And anyway, a mail can be sent to me. I will also look into it and respond to it immediately.
The next question is from Vinod Chipalkati. In addition to the Suno Moto proposals invited from industries, do you specify a bank of R&D areas preferred by you and invite proposals? I think probably most of these questions are going
anyway,
to
the question is very clear. The point is 108 list has been given. Another 108 list is going to come soon. And there are projects also going to be identified once the inputs are there from what industry can do. And there can be Suno Moto proposals also coming from the industry, what they can do also. Those projects also can be taken up and funded for the development by the industry.
Right. The other question is from Vikrant Sada. Can industries also participate or gain from the centers of excellence that DRDO has in academic industry?
I just answered that already.
Answer that. I mean, the point was that all the academic interactions which are there will now become academia, industry, DRDO interactions.
Yeah. Another question is,
give some questions to Ranjana also to handle.
No, better, sir. Let Mr. Appara only handle. He is from the industry.
She's been very helpful. Dr. Ranjana has been great. So, maybe actually the next question she can answer. And the question is, are there any plans for the question is, it's about talent management. The biggest issue that we have in our country at this point is lack of. So the question is, and the best of talent is still sitting in DRDOs and defense PSUs and ordnance factories and so on. The question is, are there any plans for cross-pollination of ideas and knowledge between DRDO labs by allowing scientists from DRDO to go on a sabbatical to private industry for a year or so?
Good question. This is one thing which is under debate. And definitely one thing I can say that in the SPVs, it is going to be there. One thing is, SPVs, people will be working from DRDO in the SPVs, which means that they are going to work in the industries. And also where there are R&D projects, how the scientists can go and work in the industries is being worked out. Good suggestion.
This is a very important point, and I think it will be very valuable if when industry takes up projects in partnership with DRDO scientists also are on loan to industry, and industry scientists are on loan to DRDO. This kind of a cross-pollination is very important.
So there's another question from Mr. Vinod from Chipalkati. If there is a foreign OEM backing up an Indian industry for a technology development, is this encouraged for speedy realization?
I have some thoughts on this, but Satish, you first.
I only say that we, as a country's head R&D, I like to say that what technologies, if they are available, capability in the country, we should use that capability in the country. And we can find out the means and mechanisms how to do it faster. But then if we have the technology here and tying up with the foreign this thing, may not be advisable.
Let me add to that. There are many areas where foreign OEMs come in and set up partnerships here, which are notionally here, but primarily anchored elsewhere. That doesn't help the growth of our industry. However, if there are situations where you're going to be primarily here in large substance, then it's a different situation. So clearly one must distinguish between these two, and the former one is not particularly to be encouraged.
Can I add one sentence? This is Ashley. I'd just like to add, if you are going to get the foreign technology, make sure you get the IP. Then it will make sense.
Absolutely, absolutely. By the way, I should say that the other panelists, please don't hesitate to raise your hand and join in any of the interactions. It's not just a question and answer session to the chairman DRDO. Please.
Let me just add to what you just said. Movement of DRDO scientists to the industry. Most of the IITs and many other institutions have put in place a system of professor in practice and associate professor of practice depending on the seniority. So please encourage the DRDO scientists to move to the academia also for a limited period of 3 to 5 years.
That's an interesting point, because being based in academia is an easier situation, and academia can be the middle ground for industry and DRDO to meet. It affords a lot of flexibility, so that is also something to be explored.
That is also another important side of it. Industry, you are working more on the D&D and development sort of a thing. But the core research with academia, there is a scheme what actually we have been discussing with the Ministry of Higher Education, wherein the professors and the scientists exchange program. So some professors come and work for a couple of years in R&D organization, and the scientists from here also go and work in the academic institute. We'll discuss separately on this point, Mr. Rakesh Ranjan. Go ahead, Mr. Apparajit.
I think I have one. Yeah, just 1 minute. I think the DRDO starting the development the production partner, I think this is in the right step, and something similar is going to happen because industry is going to get exposure to get into the development phase, and vice versa. When the production will start, the DRDO will also be participating along with the industry. So I think this DPCC aspect which has come up now is in this what we are just discussing.
The next question is, it says, as we all know, there is no dearth of capability to design in it. However, sometimes getting the latest components becomes a challenge due to various reasons and ITAR and else. So what are the plans to mitigate these kind of risks where the capability actually exists to design the product, but we are not able to realize it because we don't have the right materials?
This is an important point where critical components and critical sensors and detectors need to be made in the country. Government is taking a lot of efforts. You must be knowing that on the semiconductors, government is taking, but on the other components, a lot of other efforts are going on in IR detectors and sensors or even microwave components and all that. But this is to be hastened, and to produce this, whatever the establishments are there which are doing R&D and limited production, my feeling is they should be corporatized and they should be going up in a big way with the private industry, and private industry and scientists together in that should be continuously producing these types of a critical component, not only supply to India, supply to the entire world.
Let me add one brief point here about the components which right now we may not have a choice but to import. There, I think we should push, I stand to be corrected, on putting in place really high, really specific standards and interoperability. Therefore, in a supply chain, we will not be dependent on any one country, and we can also have mechanisms of ensuring that quality and security are maintained. Over.
There is another important point which has been raised by DF team. If funding only academia, output only is restricted to research papers, whereas if funding startups with academia connections gives result. So how are we enabling both together? Somewhat, things are happening, but how do we make it faster?
Maybe a important point is there, separate from the center of excellence. If a startup needs a collaboration or help from academia, how do we do that? We can, I think, we should note down this point and work out a mechanism how we can bring in an academic institute to support the startup. Probably an extension of that other mechanism. We have to find a mechanism. I think we should work out on this.
Let me add one point here, and we have to be a little careful when we make statements like if we fund academia, they will go off into a academic direction which is not useful. Now, that may be true in many components of academia, but it's also true today that cutting edge research, both in design and in execution, is very closely tied to fundamental research. They're not very far apart. And this very great proximity, whether it is, gravitational measurements or, avionics, the gap between fundamental research and application is very small. And therefore, the academic involvement is very, very important. We should not distinguish between basic and applied. You're talking about a DRDO model, a DARPA model. DARPA has enormous basic funding. But we must keep the wild horse of academic freedom also tuned in a certain direction. That is a challenge, and we have to go through application. Thank you.
May I interject? I'm General Shankar. I'm the professor of practice at IIT Madras. And this was a very interesting thing because I've already taken up a project through the Army on a cutting edge technology. And there is tremendous scope in this because we all also have incorporated a startup in this, exactly the point which you're saying. And I'm now 2 years down into the project and making some tremendous progress and getting some great equipment in and capacities in. And this is absolutely greenfield research. And this will take us to the next generation. We have models. The problem, I would say, is that first we have to identify these, where we are going to get result and how to put the team together. And the second thing is, we need to sort out our internal differences. This is a major problem. We are all good at it, but the internal barriers to progress are what kills such projects. I'll leave it at that. I shouldn't have interfered, but since I'm into it for the past 2 years, in fact, for the past 5 years, I thought I must put it across to you.
We can discuss on that and
yeah, we'll do that.
Yeah. Okay. Next, Mr. Aparo.
This question is from Hardik Someshwar. All the panelists, what can we do to leverage global OEMs ER&D centers in India?
I think this we need to debate. The important point, I think, difficult to answer for that. We'll keep this point and then see. As long as the IP belongs to this country, I think maybe we have to definitely consider, and we will see that. I think I don't want to say anything on this exactly. We should discuss on this. You're muted. You're muted.
Secretary DRDO mentioned about a DARPA-like system. Can you please elaborate further on this?
I think instead of elaborating details on that, I think a letter will come out. It is similar to get a disruptive research done by industry, startups, and academia, and funding them is sort of a mechanism, and working out on that, how to have a structure for that clearly.
There is a very long questions, long comment on IDEX and TDF. So
If, actually, there is a suggestion, you take it up, and instead
Yes,
of comment on it. We are
Yeah.
looking more for the suggestions. See, basically this session, Honorable Prime Minister said, we are looking for mechanisms and suggestions which are actually practical, is what Honorable Prime Minister said. That is what is more and more important.
So I think they are the final suggestion they are making is the hand-holding mechanism, wherein they can use the test facilities more easily. That is the takeaway from this particular suggestions.
I definitely feel that we should give the hand holding and also support, and also the facilities should be made available both in TDF and IDEX. Definitely.
Right. I think, sir, we
So
have.
I have some suggestions, if I can make them. See, this DARPA-like model and allocation of 1,300 crores for R&D outside DRDO is a very, very welcome step for the industry. And I think the critical challenge for us is how we will actually suitably allocate these funds and get benefits out of it. The important thing is to realize products which can be deployed by the defense services very quickly. My suggestion is that we need to categorize these funds into three categories. One which will support research at TRL 1 and 2 level and should be largely disbursed to the academia. One which will support research at TRL 3 and 4 level and be largely disbursed to startups and maybe some MSMEs, and one which will be focused on research at TRL 5 and 6 level and really can be given for making of platforms, etc., where the basic technology elements have reached a certain level of maturity. I think if we now, the bigger challenge is how to allocate and disburse these funds, like the MAKE program, which actually got into trouble because we were struggling with how to select appropriate people whom can be awarded these programs. We need a robust mechanism for that, and I would suggest different mechanisms for these three categories. For the category which involves larger industries, we must go for the QCBS kind of system, which has already been adopted by the budget in the procurement policy. We tend to convert all these to L1 based evaluations, which probably would kill the entire effort. We must look at the R&D capability and investments of the partners we are selecting. The DSIR recognition of their research centers. This I'm talking specifically for the larger industries which would be focusing on TRL 5, 6. The whole approach is how to bring TRL 1, 2 to TRL 8, 9 in a fast fashion. For the academia, there are well-established processes of giving research grants, etc. And such boards can be used along with user involvement to identify which are those green shoot technology areas which can be taken forward.
Ramchandani got it. Very, very actually in-field person's expressions and valid points to be taken. So you are only bringing out the three verticals and what TRL levels and all that. Yes, points are there, and we need to definitely take that into consideration. And probably what you said is different mechanisms for different things is very right, I think. And we will further discuss with you on this and then take your ideas. Very good, excellent points. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
We have a housekeeping announcement. So we have 12:15 time. So maybe another 5 minutes, so that 12:25 we will have to start the next session, and the moderator will.
Yeah, that is in mind. That is in mind. They are aware. We have told them that 12:20 they are closing it.
Point, Satish, as the Honorable Prime Minister said, we must hit the ground running on April 1st, and therefore the points which Arun made, what you made, integrating them and having the detailed plan of action to hit the ground running would be wonderful. I'm sure that will happen. Thank you.
Sir, there are a lot of other few comments and suggestions. We will document them and try to find answers for them.
You can take another 3 minutes, Anjana. It is
So there
12:16
is
now.
one question,
You have time.
which is, what is the priority given for IT in R&D and product development in defense sector? The priority given for IT, information technology, in R&D and product development in defense sector.
In every product development which goes into the armed forces, the IT particular sector plays a major important role, leaving aside the actual core software that gets into the actual system. There are a lot of things which is connected for the interface, human interface related, control unit, control system. This is all the IT. At least my feeling is about 20 to 25% of goes to the IT, and that actually need to be pursued. And also with the cyber security coming into the picture, these two have to be mixed up, and then we need to give good amount of priority to this area. And the cyber security part particularly to be added, and IT part should be looked into it as a separate angle. Probably that is where actually industry should get fully involved.
I've just been informed we've run out of time. Thank you, everybody. And and in terms of the questions that have not been answered, the folks from DRDO will come back to you. And now I hand it over to the chairman to give his final word.
Thank you very much. This has been a very valuable session, and we will take all the points in the chat as well as the questions into account, compile them, and this will be used in the final session. Mr. Vaidya, Satish.
Thank you, sir. From my side, nothing. And anything Mr. Vaidya has got, then we can close it.
It was a good interaction. I think industry has put forward the important suggestions to DRDO and MOD. I think we must have one more level of discussions and then freeze it so that it can be rolled out on 1st of April as wished by the Honorable Prime Minister. I think we have limited time to do that. We have just hardly 1 month to really roll out the new schemes, which is going to be workable. I mean, at broad level, the schemes have been announced, but at detailed level, how the operating people are going to really manage it, that needs to be detailed out. And I'm sure that in next 1 month, we'll be able to do that. So with this hope, I also conclude from my side.
Mr. Abhishek, that particular account, you can pronounce once again so that all the people are very clear. So everybody can send suggestions on that.
Thank you very much for all the speakers. Thank you very much for all the participants too. And please note down the email ID again, suggestions.drdo@gov.in. Please send your suggestions there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, all of you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
अभिषेक अब ये वापस क्या इसी में रहना है या वापस चले आना है?
Can SIDM take over from here for the second session? I think those who are going to be part of the trial and testing theme will have to be staying on this particular link?
Most of the panelists for this session have joined in. We'll just begin in the next 5 minutes. The session is scheduled to begin at 12:25.
Yeah, but you and the films that you are running, they are not streaming properly. I think you need to I think make some adjustments
sir.
in
Yes, sir.
your
Just
settings.
working it
Because
out.
in your settings, you have to have something enabled so that even the low, whatever is your bandwidth, in accordance with that, the films are going to be running.
Yes, sir.
Films are
Our
not,
IT team is just working it out.
the films are not
Apologies
running,
for the
your
issue.
films are not running properly, and we are not able to contextualize the group.
Just working it out, sir.
Good afternoon, everybody. Uh, Let me welcome you to this second breakout session, developing all-round defense R&D ecosystem in the country. May now request.
Hey, what is he saying?
Sorry, to meet wide-ranging testing and certification requirements, setting up of an independent nodal umbrella body. May I now request Sri Anurag Bajpayee, Joint Secretary, Department of Defense Production, to kindly come with the visit. Over to you, sir.
Very good afternoon to all. I would first of all I would like to welcome the co-chairs, Shri Sanjay Raju, Additional Secretary DP, and Shri Jayant Patil. Then the speakers are, I would like to welcome all of them and the panelists and participants. As we know that in a major push to private defense manufacturing sector, the government has opened up its testing infrastructure across the nation for use by companies developing systems for the armed forces. The change in policy has been seen as a game changer for indigenous research and development, given that in the past, private players had to send equipment abroad for testing and certification, resulting in time and cost escalations. Dozens of facilities across the nation, from the Air Force weapon testing ranges to laboratories of PSUs that can test tensile strength of material, are now available with the Defense Ministry issuing a new standard operating procedure. There have been certain policy reforms like self-certification, green channel. Government of India has also brought the scheme of DTIS, and recently, as we all know, that the budget announcement has included the creation of nodal umbrella body. Today, for that discussion on that theme, we are here, and we have a galaxy of speakers and participants, and certainly it has to be chaired by the two well-known faces of defense sector, that is ASDP and Mr. Jayant Patil. I will just go ahead with the session because we have short time to discuss. First of all, I would request ASDP to say a few words and start the session so that we can go ahead. Thank you.
So we'll play the video before that, a 2 minutes video to start.
Video.
We'll just play the video.
So we can't see it. We can't see the video.
Anupam,
Share the video.
The video is being played, sir.
No, it's
not visible.
We can see Anurag only in the full screen.
I think we have to put spotlight on the
Now share it from
host
your
screen.
Please spotlight the video.
The video is playing, but it's not on spotlight.
Now it's better. Now it's there. Can you start it again? Start it again from the beginning.
Sound is not there.
There is no audio. Thank you.
So we are playing the video again.
Can't see anything. SIDM.
We have played it now, sir.
Make it full screen.
I think you're sharing it from 2 accounts and making a mess of it. Please unshare them and then share it from the main account that you have.
There is no audio in this thing. We are not able to hear the audio. Thank you.
I think SIDM also needs to sort out their technical. Okay, we'll not.
In the meantime, sir, we can go ahead with the with as per plan, sir.
Okay.
I would request address by co-chair Shri Sanjay Jaju.
So, of course, it's not supposed to be an address at all, because this is supposed to be an information gathering exercise where we want stakeholders to contribute and tell us, because we have very limited time, 1 hour. It's a very important budgetary announcement that the trial and testing infrastructure or the proofing infrastructure that we currently have, it's within the government right now. And how do we create a system so that the industry is able to access this infrastructure? Now, this is in line with the other announcement in the budget that we're going to open up Defence R&D. So to the private sector, and industry-led design and development efforts would kick in. So the point being made is there is infrastructure available, and it's a very capital-intensive infrastructure. This is currently within DPSUs, within DGQA, with DRDO, and many other government organizations. So how do we create a mechanism so that you all in the industry get equal access to this infrastructure? And this announcement has already been made. So we wanted this particular group and this particular session to give us answers to some of the questions that we have raised in the concept note. It's there in the film. Unfortunately, SIDM is not able to play it. If they can play it later, we'll see that. But just to tell you what exactly we expect from you, And I would like all of you to kindly focus your energies instead of talking about other issues. The only issue right now in this particular session would be about the autonomous trial and testing agency that we have spoken in the budgetary announcements. And the question that we have said is, what should be the scope of this particular agency? From your own perspective, tell us what could that be? What could be the funding mechanism, the user charges and other things? How should it prioritize the industry requirements? Because most of this infrastructure is within the government. So there will be always a tendency for the government to prioritize their own needs before your needs. So what could be an enabling mechanism that we should create so that your needs are prioritized? What could be the regulatory framework? And what could be the role of the industry? Should it be led by the industry or should it be led by the government? I mean, all these questions are right now germane to this particular problem. So we would like to hear from all of you, and I would like this to be a very focused and interactive session. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. May I request Jayant Patil, the other co-chair, to say a few words?
Thank you. Thank you, Anurag ji. My friends from industry, from ministry, Shri Jaju, Shri Krishnan, Additional Chief Secretary Industries, and of course, Mr. Bansal, Chairman TIDCO, Professor Shankar, and many other colleagues from the industry who joined this session. I must, at the beginning, compliment the Ministry of Defence, because what we hearing and what we actually heard the Finance Minister speak during presentation of budget specific to Ministry of Defence have been unprecedented reforms. This is my 37th year in the industry, besides 10 years of career before. But I could never ever imagine this is something what has been talked about is getting implemented. All of us obviously will look forward to some of these new initiatives taking root. Enormous amount of increase in the defense budgets. We also heard that except for the committed liabilities, target is to keep moving towards only indigenous program going forward. Also the R&D related allocations, and I'm sure these allocations will keep going year on year as industry actually is able to absorb this to a much larger extent. And of course, a showstopper after we do a product, how do we qualify and test a product? And that's essentially where we'll focus on this specific session. Essentially, the idea is to debate, idea is to talk about factors that determine the capacity of industry, notwithstanding what we do within our own houses, but how do we actually implement it in terms of capacity? And that's essentially where we pass through the last gate, which is the qualification and testing. And that's essentially where not many industries, with some exceptions, actually have the test capabilities. Bulk of them today, as Mr. Jaju very rightly brought out, actually exist only in the public sector. Let me in a couple of minutes talk about how do we build a specific perspective towards it. And I only want to give some very successful models that exist in the world. The US has the most comprehensive defense R&D ecosystem, and obviously towards that, they have created a specific structure toward test infrastructure. They have set up a test resource management center, they call it TRMC, and the idea and the aim and plan behind is to access the adequacy of sort of major range and test facility base. And of course, these are at few places, but right across the country, they have created something which can be used by anybody and everybody for asking. Essentially for this purpose, it certainly needs that there's an authority which sits in the position of power in government who can necessarily say allocate, coordinate, and direct that these facilities be available equitably to anybody. And today in the digital world, to my mind, it's for asking that the industry who want that testing simply needs to put an application in a digital format, and of course that allocates essential priority. So this TRMC actually functions in US under an undersecretary level officer, which essentially will mean more like the joint secretary level in Government of India. As late as in January 22, the Department of Defense in US also is facing a huge shortfall to the needs of this testing infrastructure. And there's a large amount of new budget coming in, and that's essentially where the industry is also putting in money besides the government. Now, this is a model which we see in large sense being used in DGA France, it's in UK, Russia has something similar, Korea has taken a similar model. So if we are looking at across the world, those countries who essentially are quite sizably Aatmanirbhar seem to be following a model which is essentially where the government remains being someone who can authoritatively tell the PSUs and the DRDO, who essentially own, as well as the DGQA, who essentially own the current facilities, to be able to direct these specifically towards whosoever needs it at that point in time. There's a second domain, and I'm saying it with absolute clarity. Lots of larger private sector has created enormous amount of test facilities and in-house infrastructure for the purpose of testing. All of this is in the Enable accredited laboratories. Now, wherever it's an Enable accredited laboratory, today there is no mechanism by which DGQA actually accepts the certification done by these laboratories. But that's essentially where the gap which we heard when the earlier session, that there is a sizable amount of gap in what is needed and what is available. And that's essentially where one of the solutions to actually harmonize as soon as, let's say, there's a capacity available in any of these kind of facilities, this can come on board. And this can mean right from non-destructive testing to the actual firing trial and things like that. Today we have MIMC requirements which essentially are only in some DRDO and DPSU facilities, but there's also ERTL, which under the Department of Science and Technology has created some very specific and an extensive network of the test centers, specifically for electricals, electronics, and the environmental testing associated. We possibly need to have a link to these DST centers so that if there are capacities and facilities available, our members in defense industry actually can utilize that. The test facilities obviously are something where a lot of money is needed going forward. Obviously, we'll need to create an account head against which some amount of these developments and some amount of these additional investments can actually be created. And of course, looking at the main character of such a body, this role essentially within the government, we see that it will have to collate existing capacities, capabilities, test facilities, what all it can do. Also take a repository of what all is available within the industry and whether the industry actually is utilizing it fully or they do have this capacity which can be offered. Obviously, everything, nobody can get it at free. It certainly will have to be reasonable, but at the same time, equitably made available to every part of our industry. Essentially, what will also mean is once this is sort of allocated, there will have to be certain guidelines by which there will be a review process which will need to be brought in. Because once we say that it's allocated, the point which Mr. Jaju raised about somebody owns it, so he always prioritizes his own work. And that's essentially where some amount of review mechanism will help, whether this is something happening so that in future it can be avoided. There could possibly be possibility of the existing kind of setup and the plan that needs to be implemented, whether this new implementation happens wherever the existing facilities are there, or it should be targeted and specifically created in the corridors. And that's essentially where it can mean direct utilization of where it is needed. We believe that this independent nodal body, as a result, must function under the either the acquisition or the defense production department, and that's essentially where a central body sort of representing an entire industry right across the QA, R&D, public sector, private sector, everybody can become a part of this kind of a mechanism and a certain review system which can be created. This body obviously, as a result, I believe will require certain amount of annual budgeting, which essentially we need to be looking after. I had a presentation, but I thought, let me speak about it because the presentation would have taken a little longer. Presentation, obviously, I'll send for the purpose of records. Thank you so much, and let's hear from the industry.
Thank you very much, Mr. Patil. You have talked about various models. You have talked about the creation of capacities available. at various sources, be it government or private sector. Then you have also talked about the, what could be the revenue part as well as means funding part. Of course, it will guide the entire session, and perhaps we will be in position to get some, substantial recommendations at the end of it. Now, I would request, because as we all know that defense corridors have been established by the government for developing the entire defense manufacturing ecosystem, and these defense corridors will have all kind of facilities, including the industries as well as infrastructure, testing infrastructure, or CFCs, all those. It has been actually visualized that these defense corridors should have such kind of facilities. Tamil Nadu has done tremendously well because they have signed various MOUs with the industry partners. I would request Mr. Pankaj Bansal, Principal Secretary and CMD TIDCO, to give a brief presentation, and I would request all participants or the panelists to be in time so that we can finish this session within time, because the next session is with Honorable Raksha Mantri. Thank you. Mr. Bansal, please.
And I also request, all those who are in the participants list right now, please put in your suggestions, especially related to the concept note that has been circulated in the chat box. You have a chat box and we are making a record of it. Please keep flowing, keep making your suggestions flow at a brisk pace. Thank you.
Shri Sanjay Jha sir, Shri Jayant Patil ji, Anurag Bajpayee ji, and all leaders from defense forces and from industry. Good morning to everybody. I directly would like to go to defense testing and certification in Tamil Nadu defense corridor. Once the defense corridor was announced for Tamil Nadu, we have taken up the whole study. We have taken up the issues, what has to be done. And we have taken with our consultant and deliberation, discussion with the industries and all partners here. And under defense corridor, the first scheme which was brought out by the Ministry of Defense, that the DDIS scheme, we have taken a lot of efforts into that. Out of 8 DDIS proposals, we are ready for 5 proposals, and we have submitted the proposal. I will go directly to the presentation in a brief. Next. This is the testing capability we see in the southern country. So if you see in Tamil Nadu is having only 35 capabilities, so there is a need to enhance these capabilities in Tamil Nadu. Next. Next. Looking into our all 5 nodes in Tamil Nadu, there are facilities in Avdi, in Tiruchirappalli and Coimbatore with the central defense production units mainly, and it's there. We have taken note of this. Next. If we see, we have seen different testing facility which we are concentrating especially on 5 UAV testing, EMI, EMC, environmental testing, mechanical and communication. In all this thing, if we see the present what is the market available and how the market is likely to grow. If we see in all the sectors, there is a huge opportunity, and in another 7 to 8 years' time, growth is going to take from 160% to 200%. Next. So in this all 5 this thing, if you see our industry partner there, with the institution, academic institutions of the repute and the industry together, they have come forward, and 60% contribution is coming from industry and 40% from state government through TIDCO. And we have submitted the proposals. And next one. Next. So if we like to see the present status in UAV testing and EMI and EMC, much of bigger size in the market and going for more testing facilities. So we have become L2. So our request will be to Defense Ministry to take up not only under the scheme only 1 testing facility in the whole country. You can go 2 facilities also. So it will benefit to 2 parts of the countries. So this proposal can be taken up about UAV and EMI EMC. If it is not possible, then other support can be provided. So because this proposal has come up with lot of interaction, lot of deliberation and commitment from the industry. So it should be taken forward. In environmental testing, we have become L1. And for mechanical and communication also, we will go. We are going to
मेरी क्लेम कर लिया
next. Support required for everybody. In all DTS scheme, we require the support. This high facility to come in Tamil Nadu. And we have done the gap analysis in Coimbatore and Hosur for testing facility and testing infrastructure. So the separate support is required of 100 crore rupees. And our request is to setting up of DGQ satellite units in the nodes in Trichy, Hosur and Salem. It was done in Coimbatore, so which was very useful. It has given a lot of result, interaction with the industry. And next, we require funding support for space industry testing facility in Tuticorin area, where the big facility of ISRO is coming up. And then there is an unused airstrip of so to go for US testing facility, we require that we require to get use of this thing so we can use that facility, which is already available. With this thing, KITCO as a nodal agency of government of Tamil Nadu for Tamil Nadu Defence Corridor, we are having a lot of interaction with MSMEs and other industries, and they are taking up their calls to Ministry of Defence. And this forum also today is a great opportunity, and I'm thankful to Ministry of Defence coming up with our industry and states and the Ministry of Defence and Defence Forces together and understanding what are the issues and problems, what kind of support is required. In earlier presentation also, it was told by the industry that long term, if you do the investment and you do the development, you require certain minimum kind of orders from the defense forces, at least for 5 years or some minimum quantity, looking into the escalation clauses, etc. So these are the real demand, real issues which are coming from the industry. And this defense testing facilities, Ministry of Defence is very good. And we fully support this thing and we want to take it forward. With this thing, thank you to everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Bansal, for giving the perspective of Tamil Nadu Defence Industrial Corridor. May I now request Lieutenant General P.R. Shankar.
So let me, Anurag, again, my request is, because we have to close this session by 1:30. So I would request everybody to be very brief, and I have also put out all the questions that we had raised in the chat box. So I would request all of you, many of you would like to talk, but you don't have the opportunity and the time. So I would request all of you to please put out all your suggestions in the chat box as well. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. As rightly pointed out by the co-chair that we need to find out the answers to the questions. May I invite retired Lieutenant General P.R. Shankar, Professor of Practice from IIT Madras.
Independent nodal umbrella body for testing and certification requirement, there are some necessity factors. Aatmanirbharta and defense exports, which are on the left, have been identified beautifully in your concept note. But there's a major problem of operational effectiveness, which has to be kicked in when you talk of this testing and certification facilities. And there is also an issue of modernization, which is ongoing, which the Prime Minister also spoke of. When you put all these four together, the requirement of testing and facilities goes up quite a bit. Next slide, please. Yeah, what are the drivers of this nodal umbrella body? I'm not going to dispute the fact that you need an umbrella body. That's a must. You have to be clear that we are in an expanded operational and environment setting where the high altitude factor has come in a big manner, and we don't have high altitude facilities. IOR in plains and deserts always existed. And this is a major problem with us. Your volume and variety are going to go up because modern systems are going to come, legacy systems are going to stay. We have a 30 to 40-year period for any system in service. Then the user compact has expanded. We should not look at only defense. We should also look at security, disaster management, aviation, which are coterminous requirements, for which I think it will do the country a lot of good. When you look at equipment, there's another strange thing which is happening. I won't say strange, it's a logical thing. All equipment are increasing the ranges, they're increasing the sustainability, capability with the increased electronics content and complex explosives. So your defense testing and certification system and training and trial system has to cater for this. Next slide, please. Yeah, so I would like to call it, I'm talking of the scope. I wouldn't like to call it testing and certification matrix. I would like to call it training, trials, testing, and certification because they're all interrelated. On the left, if you see what are the activities, the ones in the red, I've red flagged them. Long range firing facility, high altitude firing facility, aerospace testing centers, we lack. We have to have them, otherwise we are in trouble, right? When you come down, you're talking of standard proofing, assembly, sub-assembly testing centers, and component level testing, which are plenty. We have to aggregate them because we don't have enough knowledge about it. Now, what are the first three required for? They're required for training, they're required for R&D, trials, modification, and upgrades. Your requirements are more than what you have. Who are the ones who are going to use it? Services, development agencies, and production agencies. I would say the aerospace testing centers, the defense corridors also would have, which Mr. Bansal just spoke. When you come to the lower level, they're basically for acceptance, batch proofing, life extensions, and all that. Because life extension modification also takes defense testing hell of a lot. I have personal experience that I have not been able to induct guns. I have not been able to induct ammunition because it gets stuck to the testing. It gets stuck at proofing. We cannot have that. It gets stuck at doing life extensions. So who are the ones here? You have QA personnel, defense corridors, and production agencies. Next. Right, this is the thing which we had made, which is that Ulundur Pet. I've said, let me give you a feel of what will actually come up. Depends. Why I'm putting this is, if you see, you can start with 2 crores and go to 15 crores investment. You could get some results out and go to something else. So you could go incrementally to where you want. You don't have to, go off the whole route. And these are places which are lying there with no one using there. People are, disused runways ke upar mirchi sukate hain. So can we use it? For the past 2 years, I've been struggling for this, and we have not made this thing. Okay, I'm just putting a point across. So we need to move fast. Right, next. My recommendations. I think we need to look beyond the Department of Defense production. Look at it in a national view, because this is a greenfield opportunity. We need to do something good. You need to assess the overall requirement through an expert committee. Because at this point of time, I don't think, from what I've heard from everyone and what I know personally, we don't have the breadth, the range of what we need. Need a roadmap under MOD with huge interface of the users, because the users need this as much as the industry needs these things. And in many cases, let me take it from me, I've inducted 4-5 missile systems and gun systems into service. Unless I helped the industry, they couldn't go through. Unless I took help from the industry, I couldn't go through. So there's an interface required. We need to consolidate and aggregate availability, capability with services, DRDO, DGQS, civil sectors, and IITs. IITs have tremendous capability. We have not mapped it. We don't know how to use it. That's my sincere feeling. We need to create new capability of testing and certification centers based on our SOS requirement. Only then we should go in for it. But what we are mandated, we need definitely start. Right, here is the methodology. You need to have a prioritized aggregator model based on digitalization. Something like what Uber does, what Amazon does. They are all aggregators. So if you can get the whole lot together, you know what you have, where it is, and aggregate it in terms of an app, digitalize it, and then give it. And then, of course, some will have exclusive rights, some will have specialized rights for specialized testing, some will be shared and public access rights. That prioritization you might have to do, but we have to do it. How will you do it unless you sit on it? We need to build transparency, approachability, and usability into it. Now, explosive testing is a niche facility. Not everyone can do explosive testing. Outside DGQA and DRDO, the only three people who can do explosive testing in India are IITM, which is in a very small manner, ISRO and DAE. You need to incorporate them. Similarly, you need to look at places where someone also had said, how do you go out for niche facilities, niche capabilities, right? We need to do that. For anything to do with nuclear, we must go back to ISRO and DAE. So we need to, have those radials out, right? Why I'm saying is this IIT Madras Research Park is a great model. Mr. Sanjay Jaju will recall that we had a visit there. That's a fantastic model. It's an aggregated model where 200 startups sitting there and doing the thing. Why don't we have testing centers, say 2 or 3 in each zone, wherever we feel we should have, where defense industry is concentrated, where all kinds of testing facilities are there, and then you have a process-driven system where a chap with a test, he gets a test result, it doesn't go immediately anywhere else. It has to go through a process so that defense accreditation takes place as per your requirements. Our major problem of not taking, self-certification and all that is, we don't know what this fellow is going to manufacture tomorrow, certificate he's going to come and give to us. And once, even if he gives a certificate, you take it, you pay him, and tomorrow it might not function. So you need to have traceability of the entire certification process. For that, you need this aggregated model in the research park mode. It is something which we have to think of. And I think the TIDCO and Tamil Nadu government has done something about it, because they were trying to set up research centers through Siemens and Rafale and all that. So that model is there with them. If we can tap into that model, you'll get a fantastic thing for certification and testing at a pan-India level. Major nodes must be based on defense corridors. If today the defense corridors do not own a node, do not own any testing center. The strength of a defense corridor is the strength of a defense corridor.
Sorry to interrupt. Chandra Shankar, General Shankar, you have very good points. Unfortunately, we are short on time.
Yeah. There's a last 2 points. You need to have a major national node at Delhi, and you need to have a shared funding come self-generating basis, which we can talk of later. Thank you. Any questions? I'm prepared to take on.
Thank you, Lieutenant General.
Sir, may I have the permission to run the videos? It could not be run then.
Quickly, if you can run it properly. Let's see.
Okay. Please run it. Mr. Bajpayee, over to you, sir.
Thank you, Anupam, for showing this good video, which clearly indicates what exactly we want today in this session. Now this is our intervention session. May I request Dr. AVPS Prasad, C. Semilac, for quick interventions or quick, response on this, what has been mentioned so far, and suggestions or recommendations.
Okay. Good afternoon to all the esteemed speakers and guests. I have a few points to make, and most of the points and suggestions I'm making are very relevant to aerospace in particular and system on systems. What are the suggestions and recommendations I'm making are not relevant to the subsystems. The first thing I would like to bring out is today in the country, we do not have any concept of certification other than aerospace. A lot of people, we tend to use synonymously testing and certification for land systems. Also, currently, there is no concept of certification for land, Army and Navy subsystems. The second thing is I want to resolve testing into three basic processes. One is the experimental design validation test facilities. These test facilities are something like the wind tunnel test facility, the structural load testing, the hardware in loop simulators, mainly for the aerospace. These complexity of these test facilities is very high, and the numbers are very few, and you need expert manpower to operate, own, and test these facilities. That is the first point I would like to make. Then come to the next level of testing, that is the compliance testing. This is where we do the compliance to the users' quality, ASQR or PSQR, their QR requirements. The third comes, most of which we are concerned right now, the industry, I assume, is the production, the limited series production and production testing, like the ESS, QT facilities and all. In the compliance testing, I forgot to tell, I think one of the question is, we should have a FTB, a national FTB, because most of the system on systems, the private industry struggles to get access to FTBs, that is the flight test things. So that is one thing. So now having resolved the testing into three major things, I personally feel currently the availability in the design validation test facilities, you need a lot of augmentation. We need to invest a lot of money in this, especially for payload sensors, electronic warfare systems, fire control radars. These are all relevant to the aerospace industries. Then coming to, there was a proposal, what should be the basis of this prioritization and all. Worldwide, when we talk about technology readiness levels, in India, general perception is we talk about the design technology readiness levels. But worldwide, the TRL is a weighted average of 4 technology readiness levels. That is the design capability, the process capability, process control, the testing, technology readiness levels in terms of testing.
Because we'll have to be very brief. Everybody has to be brief. We are only left with half an hour. We have many interventions. We have to have interactions also. Let's do it in a bullet point fashion now, please.
So the third thing is, one of the question is IP protection, because for aerospace certification, we need access to the design data and the software code. So there is a concern that the IP protection will be an issue. First thing I would like to tell is DRDO is not a competitor to the private industry. We will be enablers and facilitators to them. Second is, to address this concern, we are starting software and other testing centers wherein they can bring the source code without compromising on their IP rights. We will be able to do the testing to the satisfaction of the industry. Then the one more thing is the concurrent certification, what a lot of industries have been asking. I think Secretary DP and all, they had meetings, and we have enabled, even without any LOI or purchase orders, the Similac is facilitating concurrent certification to all the industries. They can walk in. And in this direction, we are starting data centers and e-certification, wherein access to online, all this by August 15th, mostly all these facilities will be up and running. I think with this, I have concluded my suggestions. Any questions, I am ready to take.
Thank you, Dr. Prasad. If there are any questions, it may be raised. Otherwise, we may proceed to
No. What you do is all questions will come in the chat box. Anurag, no, बीच में कोई मत बोलिए. खटाखट आप सारे interventions complete करवाइए quickly.
Right. So I will move to Professor Manindra Agrawal of IIT Kanpur. We would like to see his recommendation or.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to share my thoughts. And I'll be very brief and just a couple of points because a lot of points have been made. And firstly, it's a wonderful idea to have this independent autonomous entity which controls the testing in the country, especially in the defense field. And as General Shankar mentioned that industry, academia, and other R&D labs have a very important role to play here. And I'll just focus on the academia side because that's where I have more knowledge about. So whenever it comes to a high-tech testing aspect, academia can play a key role because we are well versed with this high technology domain. There's a lot of work going on. Number of startups and these days happen on our campus in these areas. So there is a good fit with respect to that. The two defense corridors that have been initiated, they will also have to play a very important role. And finally, there needs to be I would suggest a synergy between the different initiatives from different departments of the government. For example, Ministry of Science and Technology has launched a Sathi project, which is a very large-scale creation of testing facility in multiple institutions. So while that testing is meant for across the spectrum, not necessarily related to or confined to defense, but since a significant investment is being made there, it makes sense to have a coordination with that and work together so as to avoid duplication. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Manindra. May I request Shri Arun Ramchandani ji, Chairman FICCI Defence, to share his thoughts on the subject.
Yeah, thank you. Very few bullet points. Firstly, the concept of aggregating all the available test facilities is very critical. It should be aggregated under this nodal body. A digital mechanism for availability of these test facilities controlled by this nodal body is critical. Coming to the aspects of funding mechanisms, I think the DTIS scheme should be amalgamated under this body, and there is a 400 crore fund allocated to the DTI scheme which can form the initial corpus for this. The DTIS actually calls for Section 8 companies to be formed, which I think is not the right way to go. We need to look at making it profitable to run testing centers, and scaling up can be done through encouraging private entrepreneurs, maybe with minority participation from local government agencies, to set up these facilities as profitable organizations. The government should provide viability gap funding or should ensure a certain return on capital employed in the first 3 years of operation. So that type of subsidy would enable mushrooming up of these facilities. The facilities should be zonal as well as at the defense corridors so that there is concentration and amalgamation of these facilities. We can affiliate organizations like ARAI, etc., into this whole nodal body, though they are meant for different sectors, but they have a lot of common testing facilities. A very important point is about trials and speeding up trials. Today, when we export, it takes us barely 3 or 4 days to complete trials with a foreign country, whereas in India, it runs into 2 and 3 years. What we need is much more simulated facilities for trials, environmental chambers, high altitude chambers, facilities where you can do mobility or firing tests in environmental and don't have to wait for winter for the test to be carried out. All these, I think, will be big enablers for the local R&D to come up and for domestic development to get accelerated. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ramchandani. It was really wonderful to hear you. You are very specific to the questions, basically. May I go to Shri Satyanarayan Nowal, Co-Chair, PhD CCI Defence.
Respected Sri Sanjay Jajuji, Additional Secretary DP, and co-panelist and distinguished guest, I will complete within 2-3 minutes. Sir, as the government is keen to putting a place and transparent and practical policy to monitor status of the defense procurement cases. Clearly timeline have been laid out in the each activity. Such government initiative give a lot of encouragement. How the confidence of the industry will only be built after these policies are implemented in later stage spirit. Personally, sir, there is one major concern which I have experienced in my last 12 years in working in an ammunition sector. Sir, I do not want to quote any particular issue, but as of now, wherever there is a delay in the process of the procurement and permissions, the different organization in the MOD, due to any reason, we, the industry, do not come to know the cause of delay. Sir, there would be a single or multiple delaying factor which could be attitude to either industries or pressing any authority or respective department of MOD. Generally, it's seen the various department in MOD in having the long decision-making channel. As a result, the procurement, requirement and permission cycle become the casualty where the nobody had the responsibility of this delay. It is therefore my humble suggestion that the system be made in such a manner that delay at any stage exceeding the normal timeline specified in the particular activities and captured immediately the cause of the delay and the organization person responsibility can be thus the pointed out forthwith in the accountability to be fixed. Finally, this system will be beneficial to industries only if it is transparent and industries is immediately alerted whenever there is a delay in the process. I feel that being a key stakeholder and industries which is responsible to deliver on time should also be entitled to know about the issue and its agencies or department being in the dark in waiting the suspense without knowing as whether fault lies us so elsewhere due to the departmental delay what is caused to frustrate in the end. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Noal. You have raised the point of timely delivery, and I think the answer was earlier given by Mr. Arun Ramchandani when he has spoke about digitalization of all facilities. So certainly it will bring transparency and timely delivery. I would next go to retired Air Marshal Shirish B. Dev from JSR Dynamics.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity. Can you hear me all?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I'll be very brief, but I'll be candid. Currently, there is a direct conflict of interest that is holding the industry back. If you are doing job work for DRDO, there is absolutely no problem. Things will work out one way or the other. But if you are developing your own IP, your own intellectual property, which is real indigenization, and DRDO is also doing the same thing, there are testing and certification agencies. They have a direct conflict of interest in that they're staffed by DRDO people. So what you have here is that you have a CE like Mr. Prasad, okay, a great gentleman, but tomorrow he could be DG Aero in DRDO. The amount of information that is required, that sometimes I feel is really not necessary. The kind of design documents, they want complete access to the IP. In fact, a small company like mine, we are doing well only because we're making our own IP. There is a possibility that we may go outside, test it on a similar aircraft outside, pay a huge amount of money and get a certified product here. Why? Because we make something that DRDO is making, that DRDO wants to make. So where is the way? Suppose it happens to any other company. L&T wants to make a missile on its own. L&T wants to make a missile on its own. They have to give all design data to the company, and DRDO also wants to make a similar missile and compete with the industry in manufacturing. So one way of sorting this out is to ensure that firstly, only internationally accepted norms for delving into the design data, for knowing the design data, they are followed. I've been in this business for 40 years in aerospace, testing, certification, and things like that. There is a lot of difference in the way I want to get it certified in Canada. I want to get it certified in South Africa. I want to get it certified in Vietnam. I want to get it certified in Europe. And the way I want to get it certified in India. In India, it is extremely inclusive, particularly design certification. What my suggestion is that this certificate issues, where the data is coming, that should be in a repository where there should be no access to the competitors. If I give all my data to Semilac and Semilac, that data is available to everybody, then where's my IP? How can I develop IP? And a small company like me will get run over. That is one issue that I have. The second issue is something that everybody has mentioned. My personal experience is for 9 months we are trying to get access to TBRF. 9 months. Okay, and very difficult. Okay, I can quote. I have absolute no hesitation in quoting. What has happened to Congo, what has happened to other companies. In fact, small companies like mine are seriously thinking of having a base outside India, where we can get the testing done. Maybe as if it's a product that is coming from outside. That product that comes from outside is now presented to the Indian government. The money stays in India, but we are spending an enormous amount of money establishing a base outside for testing and certification. So the request is that what you have currently, the structure, the video that we saw, it's absolutely excellent video. Only for indigenization, real indigenization, we must generate IP, not just job work for anybody. And this IP has to be protected in the process of certification and in the process of testing. And how that can be done is people who are in charge of this are with the user. User has got no interest one way or the other. He's just looking to see what comes to it. So I have no hesitation in giving my data to the user, but I certainly have hesitation in giving my design data to an agency that is staffed by my competitor. Okay, and it will be very naive to say that DRDO are not my competitors and that they're encouraging me. They are directly my competitors. Okay, they are doing exactly the same thing that I want to do, or I am doing. So this can be resolved only at the ministry level. I'm so very happy to see that the ministry is now so progressive, and their certification, their permissions, legislations, whatever that are happening. Okay, they're working in a wonderful way. And for companies, small companies like us that are developing their own IP, we come in a different category. We don't take anything from DRDO. We want to offer something to the government at a significantly cheaper rate. Our cost of development is significantly low, and we need encouragement, we need mentoring, and we need to be encouraged. We have a sense of entitlement. We have a sense of entitlement only because we are truly looking at indigenization. Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Dev.
Housekeeping, Anurag, one more housekeeping announcement now because it's 1:20. We have one more intervention, I think, from Samir.
Yes, sir.
What I have actually made note of all the points, and what we'll do is last 5 minutes, at least we'll summarize all this so that when you go to the valedictory session and you have to report back to the Honorable Raksha Mantri, we go with the consensual view of what all has happened during the session here. Right? So give us 5 minutes in the end just for summarizing all this.
Right, sir. Right. Now may I request
again one more request. Anybody who has any point of view is not able to make it, you have the chat box open. I've copied everything in my computer. Yeah.
May I request Mr. Sameer Joshi, CEO New Space, to share his thoughts? Yes, sir.
So good afternoon, everybody. First and foremost, I resonate completely with what Air Marshal Dev has just said. And beyond that, the existing mandate and infrastructure available with DPSUs, DGQA, DRDO, it's very difficult to harness the very limited labs and locations in specific regions only. And the cost of testing involved across the span of the country, from the plains to super high altitude regions. Finally, if we try to pass this acquisition cost to the end user, there is a pushback. And if we make a compromise, in the basic margins, which we are already operating on, because we have to be competitive as a startup, it kind of, starts the doom journey back into the rabbit hole. Now, we are a next generation missions and technologies development startup, which uses a systems of systems approach to deliver advanced robotic platforms. Mr. Prasad from Semilac has defined the systems approach for aerospace very well. What we need to do is that we need to carry the same to other domains like land warfare. the end use aspirations here and the need of the product, to map it to a concept of operations is very well required. And this is what has to be part of the autonomous agency, which is doing a VNV on the same. Next generation areas like cyber physical systems, which are software driven and are the key for future applications and future conflicts, have to be defined. This is very important. A lot of work has to go in identifying what is autonomy, what is AI applications for them, and how do you validate that the right procedures, the right protocols have been followed, and how do you certify that? That is very important. Right now, this is something which is exploratory, but I'm very glad that CEMILAC is exploring this area, at least in aerospace. The second part is, in fact, I'll just close this here. The systematic collection of data is another, the lack of systematic, and very comprehensive data on technologies, which are yet to be inducted, is presently a bottleneck, especially for audit and mid-course correction. We're already facing this in one of our supply orders. This also, is accountability. The accountability cannot be derivative here, neither for the OEM, neither for the testing agencies. These are serious limitations for the testing agencies in the end. Here, the end user needs are to be coordinated very extensively with these autonomous body to define not only the ongoing product development efforts, but also futuristic technologies which will be inducted per a ratified roadmap. In fact, the autonomous body should have the strength to identify such areas from the public and private sector, and it should be able to ensure and assess the understanding of core competencies and capabilities, the outcomes, and very, very critical, how do you protect intellectual property for either the OEM involved or the organization involved. So this is something which has to be there on the wish list, on the must-have list. Similarly, data banks on global technology trends, global defense offset deals, etc., must be maintained. Here again, a push to develop a verification and validation standard for autonomous systems and AI, which I've spoken before, is very much required. I thank the MOD for envisioning such an autonomous body and look forward for this body to actually make a difference if we have to target the ambitious $5 billion export market by 2025. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Joshi.
So one point, Anurag, just sorry to interject again. I'm actually because of the time constraint. No, one question that I was expecting the industry to give me an answer to is how should we govern it? What could be the role of the industry in the governance of this? Now, the autonomous organization is already announced in the budget, so it's not we're not debating the need and rationale for it. It's already announced. What could be the governance structure for this, and how can industry be part of that governance structure? What's your thoughts, quickly?
It has to be a shared model with government oversight and industry participation, right? You need to have all stakeholders. You need to have users, you need to have DRDO, you need to have DGQ on the system. And you need to have someone who can, what Samir said is very important. The business of robotics, AI, cyber is total gray area for certification of these items. We need to think differently, get hold of young people who will be, or like what Manindra Agrawal said, co-opt IITs, one of the IITs or a nodal IIT who's for AI and things like that into the whole deal. That's my view. Can't be a singular system.
Yeah, another point possibly is to make it completely digitalized, and of course, if the facility is available, it just gets allocated. There's just no way about somebody then saying that no, it's not available. Just in case the facility is booked, let's say for 6 months, 9 months, 12 months,
Mr.
Patil, will happen.
Yeah, Mr. Patil, who should head it? Chalo, simple baat. Who should head it?
To my mind, it should have an oversight with ministry, but it should be headed by industry.
Okay, next.
Yeah. Unfortunately, sir, industry is at the bottom of the list when it comes to precedence. It is government, academia, and then industry.
See, the industry can't head it because the industry might not own most of the systems.
Sir, not the regional experts, the nodal experts from the industry, they should be given precedence.
We should give precedence to industry, there's no doubt, but the infrastructure which is required for this kind of a national testing, we are not looking at small parts alone. You're looking from small parts.
General Shankar, actually, I will sum that up because you have given us the answer. We were waiting for this answer which you have given today. I will when I summarize.
Yeah, fine. I have no problem. Anything to contribute. You know me well.
Yeah. No, you have given us all the answers actually. Anybody else on the governance side? Because we only have 5 minutes and I thought I'll just summarize everything. Yeah.
Commodore Mishra, you're
Industry,
muted.
may I have just a small intervention?
Yeah, yes, quick. Yeah, yes, please.
What I would suggest is that if you make industry in charge, there again is a conflict of interest. If Mr. Patil is the head of this agency and I'm doing something similar that L&T wants to do, where's the competition?
Okay.
Industry must be
That
involved.
will apply to anything, sir, across
Yes.
the board.
Where industry is involved.
Competition is always there.
Yeah, competition is there. So if there is a competition, I can't be judging you. I can't be in charge of your certification.
Got it. Yeah, got it, sir.
Sir, we can make a separate company and let that be governed by the company which is making maximum investment. And as Mr. Patil has brought out, that it should be digitalized. Whosoever applies, he gets the first chance.
Got it.
First come, first serve, sir.
Okay, because now we have only got 4 minutes. I have to summarize what all happened so that Anurag can go to the next session. And okay, so I have just put it out in a just as you carry these chits during the examinations, right? So I've just tried to do that.
We could have a governance board which has participation from DDP, from industry chambers, but the operation should be headed by an expert, individual, like a CEO of the organization who is a professional.
Okay, got it. So, sir, quickly, I've just noted down all the points, and thanks for all the contributions that came in. I think everybody has welcomed this idea of autonomous agency, and there were a lot of when we put out a detailed report for this session, we'll put out all the rationale. But in brief, we have to tell Raksha Mantri, everybody welcomed this idea, primarily from the conflict of interest perspective also, that a lot of these agencies which own this infrastructure made from government money are your competitors today. Be it the DPSUs or the DRDO, not to the extent of the DPSUs being your major competitors, but yeah, of course, there are these conflict of interest issues. So, but everybody welcomed the idea. And as far as the governance part is concerned, I think broad understanding is government oversight, but has to have, somebody said eminent person or something like that. I mean, somebody who doesn't have a conflict of interest, somebody who is out of all the businesses, but he's from the knowledge of the industry and a person of eminence and industry governance structure. Good points which came in, very important points which came in. Consolidation and aggregation.
I would like to put a point, sir.
Kindly mute. Consolidation and aggregation, and very important aspect which I think General Shankar mentioned, it's the Uber model. I mean, all the taxis are owned by individuals, but actually it's the Uber which prioritize them. So I think you gave us the answer. I mean, people will continue to own their facilities, but we can create a digitalized, prioritized aggregator model. I think very rightly put by General Shankar. Then model.
May I come in, sir? May I give a suggestion?
No, 1 second. Let me just summarize it and then we will quickly. Yeah. So shared funding model. I'm just trying to put out what all has come during the course of the discussions. Shared funding model comes self-generating, very important, because otherwise it will not be sustained beyond a point. A lot of you mentioned about the expansion of the facilities, but very important point was both aspects of concentration and amalgamation of the facilities. If we are looking at, especially the corridors. Geographical spread was important, a lot of you mentioned. Then the trial process itself was commented upon. I think there is a need for us to bring in this trial related activities also into this autonomous structure. Because even if you have access to the infrastructure, but if the trial and certification is still being done outside without industry's involvement, then you might not be able to do the complete picture. Simulation based testing, very important. I think most importantly, point mentioned was 3 things have to be a cornerstone of this autonomous agency. It has to have transparency, approachability, and usability. I think very importantly put up. Then sharing of the IP information. I think this was something which we were actually, now when you're talking about industry-led R&D, this point will always come. How do you ensure that there is non-intrusion into the IP related information from anybody, be it the certification agency or be it the testing agency or even the trial agency or a proof agency? Because IP lies at the heart of your businesses. So obviously, I think this is one aspect that we can start to look at. Then data bank on global trends. I think the point being made is very important that it has to be the charter of this. Cyber, and importantly, the point made by IIT Kanpur professor, we need to get talent in. Otherwise, there's a lot of these gray areas in cyber and others. And how do we rope in? So I think possibly this particular governance has to have the major academic institutions, be it the IITs or any other scientific institutions. To me, these were the broad. I mean, we can have a detailed report later. We'll collect all the information that you have given out.
Missed out is the accredited facilities across industry is an easiest way of adding to the test facilities. Today, they are not recognized by ministry.
Okay, so accredited facilities also have to be part of this.
Because that's a huge capacity that exists within all industries who are doing it today for their production purpose. But the certification side, they are never accepted. And these exist, can always be added to the pool.
Correct. So I made note of that as well. Any point that we missed out? I mean, in terms of the gist of what it is.
Sir, I want to have a suggestion. Looking at the conflict of interest and taking all stakeholders together and the experience of people, we are willing to take it forward. Thank you.
Anybody else? Anybody has any point? Any other point which I missed out? I can also see a lot of chat box suggestions, which I have also copied in my computer. Anybody would like to make any point? I think we are almost 1:32, so we have well in time. I think we have managed our session well, and we got a lot of answers to the questions that were there in our mind. And from my perspective,
so if I may, just one point. I think sweating of assets has been stressed, but we find that this is an internal experience. When we install a lot of testing facility, we see to it that they are used 3 shifts in a day, and that means availability of crew, uptime, maintenance, calibration. So that itself gives us big uptake in capacity to what Mr. Jayant Patil has already mentioned.
Great. Patil Sahab, last word. Again, industry lies at the center of whatever we do. So I would not allow you not to speak in the end and do a final summing up.
Let me repeat myself. I think we are in unprecedented times. The kind of relationship model which we are trying to build for building the modern India, I think is exemplary. And I need to state it, typically having seen the sector for nearly 4 decades, I'm absolutely clear in my mind that there are always going to be issues. We'll always, as industry, keep bringing up issues. But there's an honest attempt, which we see from the industry, from the ministry, to have these addressed. And I'm a firm believer that if we have genuinely a case to put up, a logic, there's always going to be heard. And on that positive note, I obviously don't want to say anything more on the testing side. We spoke, debated at length, but I think it needs to be acknowledged that there's a huge positivity in the whole segment today, essentially because of some of these extremely positive steps taken. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think we'll all have to move out of this link and go to the link number 1. And for the valedictory, thank you once again, all of you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. And anytime you need me, just give me a tinkle.
Good afternoon, everyone. We will shortly begin the valedictory session on link 1. Request you all to kindly come back on that link where the Raksha Mantri is expected to address shortly. Thank you.